Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about an unearthed 80-year-old law in Oregon that's putting a damper on home brewers. We'll also be talking about a settlement that's been reached in the case of a drug-related killing in Georgia, a few years old, but they finally reached a settlement. And a guy who shot his father-in-law at his wedding. That coming up, plus a whole lot more. Free Minds TV.
And welcome to episode 171 of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Nick, we do have a lot of stories to get to from around the country and around the world. We're going to be talking about a wedding man, a groom. That's what they're called.
I guess
right?
He shot his dad, not his father-in-law.
He actually shot 11 people at his wedding. So we're going to give a little gun safety lesson for the people living over in Turkey. That's going to happen in the second half of tonight's show. We are also going to be getting into that settlement offer for the botched police raid, where the officers kicked down the door of an old grandma and shot her full of bullets and killed her. Wrong.
It made the news. I mean, it was a big story a few years ago.
And now the taxpayers are going to be out millions of dollars as a result of that. We'll be getting into those stories. Hope I didn't give too much away, because first I want to talk about some more disturbing news, stuff that is really tragic. And that's anytime the government tries to crack down on microbreweries. It's very sad, and it's happening.
Yes, it's happening in Oregon, of all places, a state where
home breweries got its start, really.
Well,
that's like, if I think of microbrewing,
it's Oregon,
that's where I'm thinking.
It's the Northwest United States. I mean, to be honest,
it happens everywhere.
Sam Adams really broke ground as far as going commercial, going from being a home brewer. That brewery broke the ground, but there's a huge microbrewery.
Yeah, you make your own brew, don't you?
Yes, I do.
My brother does too. Lots of people.
And
I know lots of people.
Most of the beer, the commercial beer I drink, comes from the West Coast, usually Oregon, Washington, California, because that's where the best microbrewed beer comes from in the United States. Apparently, there's an 80-year-old law on the books, though, in Oregon that says that homebrewed beer cannot leave the home. And that's apparently putting a damper on plans to have a beer sampling competition, like a contest at one of the fairs, like one of the county fairs over there. Last year it had 335 entrants, which gives you an idea of how vibrant the microbrewing scene is out there. And that's according to the Oregon Liquor Control Commission spokeswoman, Christy Scott. Just want to point out here, though, that the Liquor Commission is pulling to have this law repealed. The Oregon Liquor Commission likes the fact that there's a lot of very small breweries in Oregon, and this is how a lot of them get their start. These are people who do home brewing at home. They go to these competitions, fairs, things like that. It kind of helps them hone in their skills, and it's a good stepping stone to launching a small commercial brewery. So Oregon has a good thing going. They really don't want to ruin it for themselves.
Then why don't they just ignore the law? I mean, they've been ignoring it for 80 years. Why not just continue to ignore it?
As long as it's a law, we have to enforce it.
Yeah, but I mean, there's laws on the books, not only in Oregon, I'm sure, but all over the country. I mean, here in New Hampshire, it's illegal to open a business on Sundays, but people aren't being arrested every Sunday for that, and all the businesses seem to be open, Nick, and there's all sorts of blue laws on the books like
Massachusetts has a ton of them that are weird.
All sorts of states have them. Why not just ignore it? They've been ignoring it for 80 years. Why do you have to shut down all the fun this year? I mean, this isn't only one event that's being shut down. It's all of them. All the beer tastings, right. All of bringing it out of the home.
I'd rather these laws, I mean, they could ignore it in the meantime. I'd rather those blue laws be repealed, because as long as they're around, there's always a chance they'll resurface and someone will say, well, it's just as real as the other laws.
Some dummy will say that, Nick. Some dummy will say that.
I guess pretty much all states have legalized home brewing at this point. I guess only Mississippi and Alabama are the last holdouts. Oklahoma legalized it this year.
Good for them.
So, yeah.
Well, Mississippi, they're holding out.
It's a Bible Belt. It's a Bible Belt.
They make a lot of moonshine down there. That's illegal all over the place.
Well, it's sort of a stereotype. Actually, to be honest, I think the moonshining tradition had a lot more to do with like Kentucky, Tennessee, those areas where you saw a lot of whiskey being produced before Prohibition, and it was produced after Prohibition went into effect in the woods.
My mind has an image of some hillbilly in Mississippi woods cooking up a pot of moonshine.
Well, we did a story about that, though.
We did.
I mean, even
and I had a
City
video.
are doing
I
it
remember
now.
I had a video of the old man in the woods while you're talking about these yuppies in their New York high rises.
Okay,
the video that I had on the screen was an old
Most of the
hillbilly
file
with a big
footage-
beer and a raccoon on his shoulder.
File footage is of that stereotype, yes. But you're right. Distilling hard liquor is still illegal under federal law.
Yeah, the
but
benevolent
not the
feds of what
homebrewing
they
of
allow
beer
us
and
to 100 gallons.
I think it's
Is it
100.
gallons?
Well, don't quote me on this because I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is it's 100 gallons per individual who's 21 or older in states that defer to federal law. And then I think it's up to 250 gallons per household if there's more than one person over the age of 21 in the household.
Well, I say, let them
So.
make as much beer as they want. It's fine by me. Anyway,
Me too.
silly laws being enforced that shouldn't be enforced. We do need to move on, though, because while we have silly laws on the federal level, on the state level, and on the local level, they also have silly laws in other parts of the world. And when I'm doing a hasty show prep, Nick, and I don't have time to really dig deep, I just see what's happening in the UK, because they're always doing silly stuff. So I just have to go on over to...
Ministry of Silly Walks.
Just have to cruise on over to the Telegraph or something and see what their latest headlines are. It didn't take very long until I stumbled off this one. Pensioner hanging baskets branded a safety hazard. What does that mean? Well, I guess a pensioner is just an oldie. That's all that means. It's a term for old people out in the UK.
It was because they're collecting a pension. It means retiree.
Retiree. Oldie. A pensioner has been ordered to remove a set of hanging baskets from her local market square after council bosses warned that people could bump their heads on them. Danger, danger. Linda Martin, 68, had hung the floral displays around the center of Wilton, Wiltshire in an attempt to brighten up the area. The ruling followed an earlier diktat which banned the grandmother from placing floral displays on the ground in case pedestrians tripped over them. Can't have things in the ground, can't have things in the air. People may trip and bump their heads. Paying for the flowers out of her own pocket, she said that she received very many compliments from locals as well as visitors of the town. The Wiltshire Council said that they must all be removed because they posed a hazard and could cause people to hurt themselves. So for health and safety reasons, I guess this will be I think it's the center of Wilton, I guess, will not look pretty because people don't want to stub their toes and bump their heads. Hey, you know what is also a hazard, Nick? Tree branches and rocks on the ground and curbs.
Pretty much the whole world is one big hazard.
The whole world is one big safety hazard.
And that's, I mean, with these health and safety regulations, I mean...
Everything can be construed as
Right,
a safety hazard. You should chop down every tree out there, uproot every rock.
And granted, in a lot of places in the world, you're much more free with a lot of things like freedom of expression than you might have been 200 years ago. But when it comes to these health and safety regulations, I mean, you're not free really to necessarily choose where your food comes from, what you do on your own land because of things like zoning laws. Putting out a display like this in a city park, no one would have had these kinds of thoughts 100 or 200 years ago.
Right.
It's very
Oh,
foreign.
no, someone might
and these are
bump
peasants
their
we're talking.
head.
These are peasants we're talking about. They wouldn't think that they'd need permission to make sure that their building was safe enough, because back then at least governments didn't pretend to control you for your own benefit. They've gotten a little bit more savvy now because just basically stealing the money from people and raping and pillaging in the countryside, it wasn't very popular. So they had to kind of sell it to people that, well, we're stealing from you and raping and pillaging to make you safer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole reason. I mean, that's the whole reason you see
don't
health
want
and
any-
safety rules used to sell a police state.
We don't want
like they
any
have been.
bumped heads nicked or stubbed toes. Oh, it should also be noted that Miss Martin has been placing the floral displays on the ground where it was worried that people might get stubbed toes. She's been doing that for 12 years without a single stub. Yeah.
But it's possible.
But it's possible that someone might stub their toe, or it's possible that someone might bump their head, so we must take them down. I mean, these aren't even posing real threats or dangers. There's just a possibility. There's a possibility.
In the same way that somebody could walk
everything.
into a tree or a wall. I mean, if you don't...
It's possible.
I have no idea how big the displays are, but I would assume that a flower display is fairly prominent. If you're not looking at the ground, I would assume the concern here is lawsuits, but...
Well, they were concerned, the only thing they said they were mainly concerned with were blind people.
Blind people have to use a cane or a dog.
What about tree branches? I mean, that's a
You
thing. We've
don't
read
just-
a few different stories like this. Some where you can't put signs in your yard or something because someone walks into it. What if they walk into a tree?
Or your
I mean,
fence.
this isn't an isolated incident in the UK, I guess. This kind of thing happens
croquet hoops.
all the time. Anything that you're putting out there could potentially be a safety hazard, and if some busy nanny state bureaucrat decides that they don't have a vendetta against you or something, or just is too bored and thinks that they know the greater good for society, they're going to crack down on you for it. So we've reported on a few of these stories. There's a lot more of them out there. So, I mean, at least we don't quite have it
These kinds of things will happen in
bad.
the U.S.
Not quite this bad. We
No.
don't see health and safety for everything, and I see lots of
This
these
is going
stories
on public.
popping up.
I bet this could happen here in the U.S. We've done a lot of stories where they've gone after people for mowing a public park.
That's a good point. Depending on where you are.
I think it's just as likely to happen in the U.S. with something like that. Maybe the viewers can tell us what they think.
Yeah, if you've had.
I don't think we're any better off here.
Well, it depends where you live. Geographically speaking, the United States is so much bigger. I think that when you're talking about places like the UK, it's a smaller area. So I mean, it's kind of like this, much the same. I think. Maybe I'm wrong. UK viewers could fill me in more. But here in the United States, New Hampshire, you don't really see the stories of people being fined for their grass being over 3 inches long or something. In other parts of, say, California, though, you will. So, I mean, it varies a lot in the United States, I think, where there still is a little bit of state control.
Well,
and
there's
local
federal.
control.
I think more than just the geographic area, there's the state control that remains.
Yeah.
What's left of federalism is still somewhat at work.
Yeah. So, anyway, some places in the United States have it better than others, but everyone in London is screwed. That's what my brain has deduced from this article. I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, you're not gonna. If you want to live like a free person, don't go to London.
No, come to New Hampshire. Anyways, moving right along, we need to take a break. We need to take a break because we need to have time to come back and talk about a man shooting up his whole wedding, and we also need to have time to talk about taxpayers being bilked for millions of dollars because the police screwed up and killed an old person. We'll be talking about that. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
This is Will Buchanan. I walked 3,200 miles across the country to move to New Hampshire for liberty, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, Nick, I want to tell the viewers to log on to our website and give us some money. You know, I've been noticing, we did have some people step up and donate some money to have the set done, and that will be done in the next couple of episodes. It's all ordered, it's been created, and that'll be up, I think, episode 174, hopefully, if all goes well. But the donations fell off after that. This show costs about $75 a month to produce and give out to the 20 or so stations that we're on, and there's only been a few donations since people put out for the backdrop.
People do tell me they like the show, but then they don't.
They do,
donate.
and we used to actually make money off the show before the economy died. Now that we're on more,
Well, we didn't really make. I mean,
we were in the black.
Yeah, but the money. Yeah, but then
Now
they all
we're
went back
severely
down.
in the red. It's no
Yes.
good.
Over its lifetime, the show has lost us a lot of money.
Lots of money. So if you like the show and you think that it's worth a couple of bucks, consider sending it our way. FreeMindsTV.com is where you can do that. All right, Nick, we do need to move along. We've got a lot more to get into. Let's talk about the settlement, which in a way it's good because officers are being held accountable, but so are the taxpayers. And anyways, I'll hand the story over to you. You can give background on it, and then I'll have my commentaries later.
All right. Well, the city of Atlanta will pay $4.9 million to the family of Katherine Johnston, a 92-year-old woman who was killed in a botched November 2006 drug raid, Mayor Kasim Reed's office announced Monday. Johnston was shot to death by narcotics officers conducting a no-knock raid, a no-knock warrant, which means they just kick your door in and don't announce that they're police every time. Investigators later determined the raid was based on falsified paperwork, stating that illegal drugs were present in the home. The incident prompted a major overhaul of the Atlanta Police Drug Unit, probably only because it went national. And 3 former police officers were sentenced to prison terms for a cover-up that ensued. Her family, Johnston's family, will receive $2.9 million sometime in fiscal year 2011, with the remaining $2 million to be paid in the fiscal year 2012. Last year, former officer Jason Smith was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, while former officers Greg Jr. and Arthur Tesler were sentenced to 6 and 5 years respectively. So, police actually facing charges for a criminal cover-up.
Some charges, but the taxpayers are the ones who have to pay them the money. Why don't the police officers who did this, why don't they have to pay it?
Prison.
For 10 years, then they're going to get back out. And let me ask you this, Nick.
There should be, I mean, there should be accountability.
I decided to get some guns and to go and to kick down a door and shoot an old grandma to death.
Yes, they fired
Would we
39
be getting
shots in response
6
to
years
her one.
in? Would we be getting 6 years in jail? I'm thinking it might be a few more.
Probably. Just to point out here, so that people are clear, they didn't just break in and shoot her for no reason entirely. Granted, it was an entirely false raid. It was basically a criminal break-in. She thought her home was being broken into by criminals, which apparently it was. And so she took a shot at them and missed. And they fired 39 shots in response, hitting her 5 times and killing her.
They kicked down her door in Atlanta.
No, they were criminal. Yeah,
right. I mean, what do they expect?
In Atlanta.
This is no knock raids. This kind of thing happens frequently. I mean,
this happens whether it's a legitimate warrant or not.
You're kicking down someone's door, not announcing that you're police. You don't know who's kicking down your door.
Oh, it's
you're
happened.
There's
been a lot of different incidences where this has happened. Quite often, it's the homeowner who's charged. If they actually get off an accurate shot and they survive, they're probably likely to be executed there for basically defending themselves.
There's a guy in death row, and I think it's in Washington. I don't know.
Yeah,
anyway,
there's a lot of states where it's happened.
It's sick because you don't want someone to flush their drugs down the toilet. This is another unintended consequence of the war on drugs. When you're making substances illegal, innocent people are getting killed.
And some criminals in certain areas of the country will raid your house and just yell police.
Yeah.
Or throw on the, throw on vests that say police and then kick in your door.
Look at what your lovely war on drugs has done for America. Anyways, it does irk me though, because I do think that her family deserves some money for this, because grandma got shot, very traumatic and all that stuff. It seems that someone should have to pay restitution. But why is it always the taxpayers, Nick? Why is it always the taxpayer who had nothing to do with this, the one who has to pay out and shell out money? Why not the police department who has these policies? Why not the individual police?
There should be more accountability for the individuals involved.
Well, I guess if the police...
I guess on some level the argument is that the taxpayers bear some accountability for what their government does.
I guess I can see that
argument. It's an argument that Americans will usually use against people in other countries, like we justify firebombing Dresden and Japan, saying that, oh, well, they are responsible for all the evils of their government. Then when it happens to us, we're not so happy about it, because it is sort of unfair to say that everybody in a particular country or state or city is responsible for what their government does. But I think there's some amount of truth to it.
Well, I can take that argument. Let's take that argument. The policies are because of the people, and the people are responsible for those policies.
As an aggregate whole, not as individuals.
Okay, I don't agree with it, but I'll take it. What about when the officers falsify the paperwork, and that's what causes it? Then it's an individual who didn't follow procedure, who didn't follow what the taxpayers supposedly agreed to, even though they didn't all agree to. What they supposedly agreed to, criminal acts beyond that on the part of the officers, shouldn't they be the ones paying for this once they get out of prison? It makes sense.
I mean,
but instead they're going to be free people, and everyone else and tax and grandkids down the line will have to be paying for this, because the city of Atlanta doesn't just have money laying around. They're in debt
probably in the evidence locker of the narcotics room. I'm sure they probably have $5 million worth of stuff lying around there.
They do have that.
You could auction off the
asset forfeiture.
They probably won't do that, though.
No, they'll just let it.
That'd be a nice turnaround to asset forfeiture if they used it against the
That would actually, I'd be okay with that.
Evidence locker.
I don't like
just
asset
take $5 million worth of stuff. Drugs, guns, whatever.
It's all yours. All right, Nick. This is a kind of a shorter story, so it's going to be have to segment into the gun safety in general. And that's why this is being brought up. This is a very dark and gloomy story, but we're going to have a kind of a humorous
It's happening
tinge
overseas,
to it because
so
it's
okay
not
to laugh
happening
at.
to us. It's exactly. It's happening in Turkey. Who even knows where Turkey is on a map, right, folks? So it's okay to laugh at it. It's really not. It's sick, but if you're not laughing, you're crying, right? Groom accidentally kills dad, 2 guests after firing a celebration shot at a wedding. This is coming from the AFP. A groom accidentally killed 3 relatives at his wedding in Turkey yesterday when he fired into the air with an assault rifle in celebration. The Anatolia news agency reported 8 other people were wounded in the incident at the village of Akanazos in southeastern province of Gaziantep. The groom unleashed a volley of rapid aerial shots with an AK-47 rifle to celebrate his nuptials, but quickly lost control of the weapon and accidentally raked the guests with bullets, the report said. His father and 2 of his aunts died at the hospital. The groom was promptly arrested. Apparently, it is common for people in Turkey to break out in celebration with guns and shooting them into the air. When they get married or have other sports victories too, I guess. Now, Nick.
It's in most parts of the Middle East, it's sort of
the important lesson here is
some
when
parts of the
you're
American
firing
South.
an assault rifle into the air, use 2 hands, not just one.
Well, okay, number one, because people do this here in the U.S. too. Number one, you should never fire a gun into the air because you really don't know where the bullet's going to come down, and especially with any firearm, but especially with, say, a rifle, it's very, I mean, people fire birdshot into the air all the time. That's fairly limited. But if you're dealing with projectile weapons like pistols and rifles that fire
and
a single large projectile,
AK-47s.
or even a shotgun with a slug or a heavier shot, yes, never fire them into the air because the bullets can come down a couple miles away and kill people. It's happened here in the U.S. And if you are going to do it, as you pointed out, Toby, at the very least, if you're going to fire an assault rifle, a select fire weapon into the air, make sure you use 2 hands because that's how it was designed to be used.
You know, it's stories like these, Nick, that get people over here, the safety nuts, the gun safety nuts, the people who want to ban guns. It's stories like these, though, that give them fodder and allow them to pass
some
laws.
extent, but it's like saying if you drive a sedan at a brick wall at 60 miles an hour and you hit the brakes 10 feet
Right.
before, oh, look what this guy did. Yeah, it was somebody being retarded, and they managed to, I mean, you could do it with
Careful.
a car or
Our PC
anything.
viewers don't like that word, Nick. I used it once and got a volley of hate
They
mail.
can send all the emails they want. I realize.
But the point is here, gun safety. It's safety with guns. You don't fire an AK-47 with 1 hand into the air. Well, it seems like common sense to me, but
Well,
it's important to note that this isn't the only time something like this has happened in Turkey. Apparently this is more common than one would like to think. You'd think people would learn. But if you're having a gun, you should respect it like you do a car or anything else that's dangerous. You should learn how to use it in a responsible
I mean, you
manner.
wouldn't swing a chainsaw over your head with 1 hand while it's running, would you? I mean, most of us wouldn't.
If you're juggling them,
There's a reason those people are considered
stupid.
freaks. Yeah, I mean, it's just, and I think most of them actually take the chain off. That's
Yeah,
the
there you
trick. But yeah, I mean, it could happen with any dangerous implement. That's the
Right.
thing here. Firearm safety really just boils down to common sense, like keeping control over the weapon while you're firing it. So, but I mean, it's something that people do need to think about more because not everybody exercises it over here. It's not like things like this only happen in Turkey. Firearms accidents happen everywhere.
Yeah, I guess you're right. They do, especially, I mean, even with hunting and stuff. I mean, people just don't respect them in a certain sense sometimes, I think. And I think that if you have respect for a weapon, then everything's going to be just fine. Just like with a car. I mean, a car is arguably just as, if not more dangerous than a gun. I mean, it can definitely kill people in the same manner. But for some reason, that's not what people are up in arms against. For some reason, guns have this special connotation.
Well, I think it's
mixed with
because
them.
I think cars are somewhat familiar to everybody, and people understand that if you're at risk from some other drivers on the road, but if you're driving reasonably, it's and safely, it's fairly difficult to have an accident. Not that all of us do all the time because we drive so
But
much,
it's the same thing with a gun. Is it just that people aren't
I
familiar with them?
I think most people who are really scared, I haven't met too many people who have had experience shooting and understand how a firearm functions and are scared of guns. Most of the people who I meet who are afraid of guns and want them kept far, far away from them are people who don't know how to handle them, they don't know how they work, and people tend to be scared. All they know about guns is what they see in the movies and on television.
And stories like this.
Which every time you see guns in the media, like on our show, it's usually when somebody shoots their own wedding, shoots himself in the crotch. These are the exceptions, not the rule.
But these are the reasons why people should be familiar with weapons, Nick. These stories are the reasons why people should teach about gun safety and other weapons as well at a younger age. And instead, people do the opposite. They knee-jerk away from that and say, oh, well, shelter my kids away from that, shelter me away from that.
And quite often those are the kids who had the accidents.
Right, the kids who are curious about it because their parents didn't let them learn about guns.
Yep.
So now they're going to go, and those are the kids who you hear about shooting themselves. Or
I mean, not every time. I mean, it can happen. Just because you train somebody in firearm safety doesn't mean that
accidents happen all the time.
Can't happen, but
I think
far less likely to
someone
happen
who's
if you know
trained
what you're
around
doing.
them, someone who is educated and learns to respect them is far safer than someone who's just afraid of a gun, in my opinion.
Well, it would be like the same with driving. You wouldn't take somebody who had never been exposed to a car and have, you wouldn't. They'd probably be a much more dangerous driver if they were freaking out while they tried to learn, as opposed to just having a rough idea of how it works, like most of us do.
I agree with you, Nick, but I'm sure there's others out there who disagree avidly. It's amazing. There's a lot of people out there who think that no one should own a gun.
Probably not that many in our local viewership area.
We're on all over the country, Nick. We're on in California and Georgia and Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont and Wisconsin and Minnesota. I mean, they're all over the place.
I haven't met that many people that completely ban them in New Hampshire, Vermont.
Maybe
California.
Classes at
Keene State College with people who aren't even New Hampshire residents go to school.
All right. Anyways, I'm sure there's people. We're on in several stations in Massachusetts, Nick. So those people are out there saying these crazy gun
Not everybody.
nuts. I don't even own a gun. Anyways, that's gonna do it for us. We'd love to hear from you, though. freemindstv.com is the web address. From there, you hit the contact button, easiest way to contact us. Also, the way that you give us money, if you like this show, if you think that it's important to talk about this stuff, consider giving us a donation, because we're way in the red at this point. Until next week, it has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Join us this Sunday and every Sunday, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Free Minds Radio. Until next week, take it easy.
This edition of whatever it is you're watching is brought to you by Ridley Report, something, Ridley Report.